Ever get that feeling that our culture is just a giant remix, a collage of styles from other decades, or that it's getting harder and harder to tell what's real from what's just an image? Well, if you felt that, you're tapping into what the theorist Fredric Jameson called postmodernism. And in his landmark essay, he made a pretty bold claim. This isn't just some new art style. It's the cultural logic of our entire economic system. It's a huge idea, so let's break it down.
All right, so to really get a handle on postmodernism, we got to first look at what came before it, and that's modernism. We're talking about the art of the early 20th century, and it was all about deep feeling, deep meaning, this constant search for some kind of truth hidden just beneath the surface of things.
Yeah, this chart right here, it nails the shift perfectly. Modernism was all about depth, intense emotion, the unique individual, and then bam! Postmodernism comes along and it's all about the surface, a kind of cool blankness and the endless copy. History wasn't about what really happened anymore. It was just about nostalgia, a style. So what caused this seismic shift? Well, the answer might just lie in a tale of two pairs of shoes.
First up, Van Gogh's Peasant Shoes. Now, for Jameson, this is way more than just a painting of some old shoes. It's like a portal. This is a modernist masterpiece because looking at it opens up a window into a whole forgotten world. The dirt, the sweat, the backbreaking work of peasant life. You can practically feel the mud caked on them.
And it wasn't just Jameson. Thinkers like Martin Heidegger looked at this painting and saw the same thing. He said the painting reveals the truth of the shoes. It recreates their whole world. The tired steps of the woman who wore them, the solitary path through the fields. The art unlocks a whole hidden reality. This, right here, is that modernist search for depth in action.
So, what came next? Well, Jameson calls it the Great Flattening. The era that followed modernism didn't keep digging for that deeper truth. Nope. Instead, it just paved right over it. It traded all that intense feeling for something cool, glossy, and totally detached.
Okay, now look at these, Andy Warhol shoes. So what world do they open up? According to Jameson, nothing. Not a thing. He calls them a random collection of dead objects. See, unlike Van Gogh's, these shoes have zero connection to a person, to a world, to a story. They feel more like something out of a slick magazine ad, completely cut off from any real human experience.
And this brings us to a huge key word for postmodernism: depthlessness. With the Warhol painting, what you see is what you get. The surface is everything. That old modernist urge to dig deeper, to try and interpret some hidden meaning, well, here, you just hit a wall. There's nothing underneath. The search for meaning comes up totally empty.
Which leads us to the central mystery of this whole thing. What on earth happened? How did our entire culture go from the intense, raw emotion of something like The Scream to the cool, blank, shiny surfaces of Warhol? What could possibly cause such a massive flattening of our art and maybe our lives?
This is where Fredric Jameson comes in with his core argument. He says this massive cultural shift wasn't some random accident. It wasn't just a bunch of artists getting bored. No, he argues it's directly connected to a huge change in how our global economy works.
See, for Jameson, you just can't pull culture and economics apart. They're totally intertwined. He argues that any opinion you have on postmodernism, whether you love it or hate it, is also, whether you know it or not, a political take on the kind of multinational capitalism we live in today.
And it's really important to get this. He doesn't see postmodernism as just one more ism you can choose from. He calls it the cultural dominant. Think of it like the air we breathe or the water we swim in. It's the total environment. Everything that gets made now, even stuff that tries to fight against it, is still operating inside this postmodern force field.
And he maps this out across history. He sees three basic stages. First, you had early market capitalism, which gave us the artistic style of realism. Makes sense. Then came monopoly capitalism, and with it, modernism. And now we're in the era of multinational global capital, what he calls late capitalism, and its cultural logic is postmodernism.
So the crucial takeaway here is this. Postmodern culture, with all its weirdness, the depthlessness, the blankness, the endless copies, isn't just random. Jameson says it's the direct cultural expression of a new, more intense, and more global version of capitalism that has penetrated every last corner of our lives.
So, what does it actually feel like to live inside this postmodern world? Well, Jameson argues it leaves us feeling lost, kind of adrift in a sea of images and confused by a bewildering new kind of space. Let's look at the clues.
First, let's talk about parody versus pastiche. A parody, like a good spoof, only works if we all agree on what the normal thing is that's being made fun of. But in our world, that norm has shattered into a million pieces. So what are we left with? Pastiche. Jameson calls it blank parody. It's like wearing a costume from another era, but with no joke attached. It's just copying a dead style.
And this leads right into what he calls the nostalgia mode. Think about all the movies and TV shows set in the 80s or 70s. They're not really about what those decades were actually like. They're about our pop culture idea of them. History gets flattened into a collection of cool images and retro fashions. The past becomes just another style you can consume. And this brings us to another wild concept, the simulacrum. It sounds fancy, but the idea is simple. It's a copy of something for which there was never an original to begin with. A copy of a copy of a copy. Our culture is now saturated with these. We're so surrounded by images of reality that it becomes almost impossible to find the real thing underneath.
But this feeling of being lost isn't just about time and history. It's also about space. Jameson argues that postmodernism has created a bizarre new kind of hyperspace. And he says the perfect example is a real building, the Bonaventura Hotel in Los Angeles.
I mean, just think about trying to navigate this place. First of all, it's almost impossible to find the entrance. The outside is this giant wall of reflective glass that just bounces a distorted image of the city back at you. And then once you get inside, this huge symmetrical lobby makes it impossible to get your bearings. You literally can't figure out where you are. The building is designed to disorient you.
And here it is, the big aha moment. Jameson says that feeling of being literally lost inside the hotel is a perfect symbol for how we feel in society. We can't locate ourselves in this new hyperspace, just like we can't figure out our own position inside the massive, invisible global network of late capitalism.
So, if we're lost in this new cultural and economic maze, what's the way out? Is there a way out? This is the huge political challenge that Jameson leaves us with, and his proposed solution is pretty radical. Here's the core of the problem. To criticize something, you kind of need to be able to step outside of it, right? To get some critical distance. But Jameson's point is that postmodernism has expanded to fill every crack and corner of our lives. There is no outside anymore. We're completely submerged in it. And so the old ways of protesting or critiquing, they just get absorbed. So what do? We need a new strategy. Jameson calls for a new kind of political art, an aesthetic of cognitive mapping. The idea is that art's job now isn't just to express feelings or protest. Its job is to teach us, to invent brand new ways to represent our crazy, complex world so we can finally create a mental map of the system, figure out where we are, and then, maybe, figure out what to do.
Because without these new maps, we can't act. We're just wandering around lost. Only by figuring out where we are can we start to imagine a different future. But this leaves us with a truly monumental question. Maybe the question of our time. In a world of shiny surfaces, endless copies, and disorienting spaces, how do we even begin to draw a map of what's real?